I saw the exact moment each of my patients would die floating above their heads in glowing numbers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. You might think working in an ICU prepares you for death. After 12 years as a critical care nurse at Riverside Medical Center in Milwaukee, I thought I'd seen everything. I'd held hands as final breaths were taken. I'd performed CPR until my arms burned. I delivered the worst news to countless families. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what started happening in February of 2019. This story was originally shared on All Nurses Forum, but I need to tell it in full because people deserve to know the truth about what I witnessed. Some say it was stress-induced hallucinations. Others claim I tapped into something beyond our understanding. All I know is that for 3 months, I became death's unwilling secretary, forced to watch its schedule play out in real time. It started on February 14th, Valentine's Day, which feels cruelly ironic now. I was working the night shift, my third 12-hour stretch in a row. The ICU was fuller than usual, with flu season hitting hard. Room 7 held Mrs. Chun, a 68-year-old woman recovering from pneumonia complications. I entered her room around 2 a.m. to check her vitals, and that's when I saw them for the first time. Numbers. Faint, glowing numbers hovering about 6 inches above her head, like a holographic display. 18 hours, 34 minutes, and 27 seconds. At first, I thought I was seeing things. I rubbed my eyes, blinked hard, even stepped out and came back in. The numbers were still there, and they were counting down. 18 hours, 34 minutes, and 26 seconds. 18 hours, 34 minutes, and 25 seconds. 18 hours, 34 minutes, and 24 seconds. My hands trembled as I checked her monitors. Everything looked stable. Her oxygen saturation was improving. Her fever had broken earlier that evening. By all medical indicators, Mrs. Chun was on the mend. But those numbers kept ticking down, silent and relentless. I told myself it was exhaustion. 3 straight nights of barely any sleep can make anyone see things. I finished my rounds, grabbed a coffee, splashed cold water on my face. When I returned to Mrs. Chen's room an hour later, the numbers read 17 hours, 32 minutes, and 15 seconds. They were real, and they were counting down to something. I spent the rest of my shift obsessively checking on Mrs. Chen. Her condition remained stable, even showed signs of improvement. Her daughter visited that morning, bringing balloons and flowers. They laughed together, made plans for Mrs. Chen's discharge later that week. All the while, I watched those numbers decrease. By the time my shift ended at 7 a.m., they read 11 hours, 45 minutes, and 33 seconds. I didn't want to leave. I made excuses to stay longer, pretending to finish paperwork, helping with the shift change. But eventually I had to go home. I barely slept, my mind racing with questions and dread. I called in that evening to check on Mrs. Chin. The day nurse said she was doing well, even ate solid food for lunch. But I knew what those numbers meant, even if I didn't want to admit it. I arrived for my next shift at 7 p.m., and the first thing I did was rush to room 7. The numbers above Mrs. Chun now read 34 minutes and 27 seconds. 34 minutes. I stayed close, checking on her every few minutes. Her vitals remained stable. At 7:30, she was watching TV, complaining about the hospital food. At 7:33, she asked me to adjust her pillows. At 7:34, she suddenly gasped, clutched her chest, and her heart monitor erupted in alarms. Code blue. The crash team rushed in. We performed CPR for 45 minutes, pushed every medication in our arsenal. Nothing worked. Time of death, 7:34 p.m. Exactly when the numbers had reached 0. The official cause was a massive pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that had been invisible on all our scans. It had been lurking, waiting, scheduled. I stood there in the aftermath, watching her daughter sob, feeling like I'd been given information I was never meant to have. What was the point of seeing death's schedule if I couldn't change it? That night changed everything. I started seeing the numbers above other patients too, but not all of them. Only some had these countdown timers, and I quickly realized what they meant. Every patient with numbers died exactly when their countdown reached 0. Mr. Rodriguez in room 12 had 74 hours, 22 minutes, and 14 seconds above his head. 3 days later, his liver failed at the precise moment. Sarah Mitchell, the 23-year-old car accident victim in room 3, had 2 hours, 45 minutes, and 52 seconds. She threw a clot to her brain exactly on schedule. The numbers never lied. They never shifted. They were absolute. I started documenting everything in a private journal. Times, dates, patients, causes of death. Within 2 weeks, I had recorded 11 cases. Each death occurred exactly when the countdown ended. I tried everything to prevent them. When I saw 43-year-old Thomas Wright had only 6 hours left, I ordered extra tests, convinced the attending physician to run additional scans. We found nothing alarming. His death from a sudden cardiac arrest was labeled unexpected, but not unprecedented given his underlying conditions. But I had known. I had watched those numbers tick down while his wife held his hand, oblivious to the countdown only I could see. The weight of this knowledge was crushing me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every shift became a nightmare of watching clocks above heads, knowing exactly when someone's story would end. I considered quitting, but something kept me there. Maybe I thought I could find a way to change things. Maybe I was just documenting evidence of something beyond our understanding. The other nurses started noticing my behavior. They said I was jumpy, distracted, that I spent too much time staring at patients. I couldn't exactly explain that I was watching death's schedule play out in real time. By early March, I had documented 23 cases. The patterns were becoming clear. The numbers appeared only for patients who would die in the ICU. Patients who recovered never had them. Patients who would die elsewhere, after transfer or discharge, never had them. It was like the ICU itself was marked territory, a place where death kept a precise calendar. I tried photographing the numbers, but they never appeared in pictures. I tried pointing them out to others, but no one else could see them. I was alone with this terrible gift, if you could even call it that. The countdown timers varied wildly. Some patients had days, others mere hours. The shortest I ever saw was 17 minutes for a man who came in after a motorcycle accident. The longest was 2 weeks for an elderly woman with multiple organ failure. But regardless of the duration, the end result was always the same. 0 meant death. No exceptions. No miracles. No last-minute saves. The universe, or whatever force controlled these numbers, didn't make mistakes. March 15th brought a new horror. I was assigned to room 9, where 8-year-old Lucy Harper was recovering from meningitis. The moment I walked in and saw 14 hours, 22 minutes, and 8 seconds above her tiny head, I had to excuse myself to vomit. A child. A beautiful, bright-eyed child who was supposedly recovering well. Her parents were so hopeful, talking about her return to school, her upcoming birthday party. I spent that shift fighting tears, watching those numbers decrease while Lucy colored pictures and chatted about her favorite cartoons. I broke protocol that night. I pulled Lucy's parents aside and suggested they might want to stay close, spend extra time with her. I couldn't tell them why, just said it was a feeling. They looked at me strangely but agreed to stay. Over the next 14 hours, they never left her side. They read stories, sang songs, held her hand. When Lucy suddenly deteriorated, they were there. When she passed at the exact moment the countdown reached 0, they were holding her. At least I had given them that. It was the only control I had in this nightmare. Word got back to my supervisor about my conversation with Lucy's parents. She called me in for a meeting, expressed concern about my mental health. She mentioned that I'd been acting strangely, that other staff had noticed my behavior. She suggested I take some time off, maybe see a counselor. I agreed to take a long weekend, but I couldn't stop thinking about those numbers. Were they appearing while I was gone? Was someone dying on schedule while I sat at home, the only person who could have known? I returned to work more determined to understand this phenomenon. I researched everything I could about near-death experiences, precognition, temporal perception. Nothing quite matched what I was experiencing. Some cultures believed certain people could see death approaching, but the precision of these countdowns was unlike anything in folklore or medical literature. I started testing variables. Did touching the patient affect the numbers? No. Did medical interventions change them? Never. Did prayer or positive thinking help? The numbers remained unmoved. By late March, I had documented 31 cases. My journal had become an obsession, filled with times, dates, medical details, and my own desperate theories. I noticed that I could see the numbers from anywhere in the ICU, through windows, on security monitors, even in reflections. It was like they existed on a different plane of reality that only I could perceive. Sometimes I wondered if I was going insane, if this was all an elaborate hallucination. But the accuracy was undeniable. Every countdown ended in death. April arrived with a case that shattered my clinical distance. Mr. James Patterson, room 5, had been in a car accident. His numbers showed 36 hours, 18 minutes, and 44 seconds. 36 hours. What destroyed me was that James was engaged to my colleague, Melissa, one of the best nurses in our unit. She was off duty, planning to visit him the next evening after his surgery. I watched her text updates to our group chat, optimistic messages about his improving condition. The surgery went perfectly. The doctors were confident. Melissa was relieved. But those numbers kept counting down. I faced an impossible choice. Tell Melissa something that would sound insane and cruel, or stay silent and let her miss her last chance to say goodbye. After agonizing for hours, I chose a middle path. I suggested she might want to visit sooner rather than later, just to be safe. She thanked me but said she had commitments she couldn't break. James died 36 hours after I first saw his numbers, from a complication no one had anticipated. Melissa never got to say goodbye. The guilt of not trying harder to warn her still haunts me. The mental toll was becoming unbearable. I was seeing death everywhere, unable to prevent it, forced to watch it approach with clockwork precision. I started avoiding looking directly at patients, keeping my eyes down, focusing only on medical equipment. But the numbers would catch my peripheral vision anyway, glowing faintly in the darkness of the ICU nights. Some patients had days left, unaware they were living their final hours. Others had mere minutes, and I had to act normally, professionally, while knowing their time was almost up. April 18th brought a new development. I was working with Dr. Harrison, one of our attending physicians, when he mentioned something odd. He said he'd noticed I had an uncanny ability to predict which patients would take turns for the worse. He'd been tracking it informally, and found that whenever I expressed concern about a patient, even when their vitals seemed stable, they invariably deteriorated. He asked if I had developed some kind of intuition from my years of experience. I mumbled something about pattern recognition and changed the subject. But Dr. Harrison's observation made me realize others were noticing, even if they couldn't see what I saw. I had become death's herald in their eyes, the nurse whose concern meant doom. Some staff started calling me the angel of death as a joke, not knowing how accurate and painful that title was. I considered telling someone the truth, but who would believe me? I'd sound delusional. They'd pull me from duty, maybe commit me for psychiatric evaluation. And the numbers would keep counting down whether I was there to see them or not. By the end of April, I had documented 44 cases. The accuracy rate was 100%. Not a single countdown had been wrong. I started wondering why I had been chosen, if chosen was even the right word. Was this a curse? A gift? A glitch in reality that only affected me? I researched my family history, looking for any precedent. I found nothing. I was not special, not psychic, not descended from some line of mystics. I was just a nurse who had suddenly started seeing something I shouldn't be able to see. May 3rd was when everything changed again. I was having coffee in the break room when my phone rang. It was my mother. My grandmother, who lived in a nursing home across town, had taken a fall and was being brought to our hospital. She had broken her hip and would need surgery, but at 91 years old, any surgery carried risks. When the ambulance arrived and they wheeled her into the ICU for preoperative stabilization, I saw them immediately. The numbers above her head, 72 hours, 14 minutes, and 33 seconds. 3 days. My grandmother had 3 days to live. The room spun. This wasn't just another patient. This was the woman who had raised me after my parents divorced, who had taught me to be strong, who had inspired me to become a nurse in the first place. And now I could see her expiration date floating above her silver hair. She smiled when she saw me, reached out her frail hand. She told me not to worry, that she was tougher than she looked. I held her hand and forced myself to smile back, those numbers burning in my vision. 72 hours, 14 minutes, and 32 seconds. 72 hours, 14 minutes, and 31 seconds. 72 hours, 14 minutes, and 30 seconds. I threw myself into her care with desperate energy. I consulted with every specialist, reviewed every test result, monitored every vital sign. Her surgery was scheduled for the next morning. The orthopedic surgeon was confident it would go well. Her heart was strong for her age. Her lungs were clear. There was no medical reason to think she wouldn't recover. But those numbers didn't care about medical opinions. They just kept counting down, indifferent to my anguish. I stayed by her side as much as my duties allowed. We talked about old times, looked through photos on my phone, laughed about family jokes. She was in good spirits, excited to get the surgery over with so she could start physical therapy. She had plans for her 92nd birthday in August, a cruise she'd booked with her sister. I listened to her talk about the future while watching her time tick away. 48 hours, 22 minutes and 15 seconds. 48 hours, 22 minutes and 14 seconds. 48 hours, 22 minutes and 13 seconds. Each second was agony. The surgery went perfectly. The surgeon said it was one of the smoothest hip replacements he'd performed on someone her age. She came through anesthesia well, was alert and talking within hours. My family gathered to celebrate the successful operation. My mother brought balloons. My brother drove in from Chicago. Everyone was relieved, optimistic. I stood in the corner of her room, watching them laugh and plan her homecoming, while above her head, the numbers showed 31 hours, 45 minutes and 22 seconds. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my mother aside and tried to prepare her. I said we should cherish this time. That recovery could be unpredictable at Grandma's age. My mother patted my hand and said I worried too much, that the doctors said she was doing great. How could I explain that I was watching a countdown to the exact moment we would lose her? How could I make them understand without sounding insane? I couldn't. So I just stayed close and counted down with those terrible numbers. On the second day post-surgery, my grandmother developed a slight fever. Nothing alarming, the doctors said. Common after surgery. Antibiotics were started. The fever broke. Everyone relaxed except me. The numbers now showed 18 hours, 33 minutes, and 41 seconds. I called in sick for my shift that night, refusing to leave her side. My supervisor was understanding, given the circumstances. I held my grandmother's hand and watched those numbers decrease, each second a grain of sand falling in death's hourglass. She was doing so well that they talked about moving her out of the ICU the next morning. Her vitals were stable. She was eating solid food, even walked a few steps with assistance. The physical therapist was impressed with her determination. My family started discussing rehabilitation facilities, home modifications for her return. I sat there listening to plans that would never happen, watching those numbers fall below 12 hours. 11 hours, 58 minutes and 33 seconds. 11 hours, 58 minutes and 32 seconds. 11 hours, 58 minutes and 31 seconds. That evening, my grandmother and I were alone. The rest of the family had gone home to rest. She looked at me with those sharp eyes that had always seen through my childhood lies and asked what was wrong. She said I'd been acting strange, looking at something above her head. My blood went cold. Could she sense them somehow? I told her I was just worried, but she shook her head. She said there was something else, something I wasn't saying. Then she asked me a question that still haunts me. You can see it, can't you? When it's going to happen? I broke down. I told her everything. The numbers, the countdowns, the 46 cases I had documented, the terrible burden of knowing but being unable to change anything. I expected her to think I was having a breakdown, to call for help. Instead, she squeezed my hand and said she believed me. She said her own grandmother had claimed to see death's approach, though not with such precision. She said it was a heavy gift, one that came with purpose, even if that purpose wasn't clear yet. We spent the next 8 hours talking about life, death, and everything in between. She wasn't afraid. She said 91 years was a good run, that she'd lived fully, loved deeply, and was ready when the time came. She made me promise not to blame myself, not to carry guilt for something I couldn't control. She said maybe I was meant to be a witness, to document something beyond our understanding. As the numbers fell below 1 hour, she asked me to call the family. She wanted to say goodbye. My mother, brother, and aunt arrived confused, but came quickly when I said it was important. My grandmother spoke to each of them, told them she loved them, shared final words of wisdom. They thought she was being dramatic about the surgery recovery. Only I could see the numbers above her head, 28 minutes and 14 seconds. She held my hand tightest, whispered that she was proud of me, that I should use this gift to help others somehow. I watched those final minutes tick away, surrounded by family who had no idea they were witnessing her last moments. At 11:47 p.m. on May 6, 2019, the numbers reached 0. My grandmother closed her eyes, took one last breath, and passed peacefully. The official cause was a pulmonary embolism, the same thing that had taken Mrs. Chun. The doctors said it was a known risk after hip surgery, that there was nothing anyone could have done. But I knew better. I had watched it approach for 3 days, powerless to stop it. Death had kept its schedule once again. After my grandmother's funeral, something changed in me. The grief was overwhelming, but there was also a strange sense of completion. I had documented 47 cases, including hers. Each one had proven the same truth. These countdowns were absolute. On May 10th, I returned to work for one last shift. I needed closure, needed to see if the numbers were still there. They were. Mrs. Williams in room 2 had 45 hours, 33 minutes, and 18 seconds above her head. Mr. Foster in room 11 had 8 hours, 45 minutes, and 52 seconds. But as I stood in the ICU that night, watching these countdowns to mortality, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. The weight of seeing death's schedule without being able to change it was destroying me. I finished my shift, documented my 47th case in my journal, and then I made a decision. I submitted my resignation the next morning. I couldn't explain the real reason, so I cited burnout, the need for a career change. My supervisor was surprised but supportive. My colleagues threw me a small goodbye party, joking that the angel of death was abandoning them. The strangest part? The moment I walked out of Riverside Medical Center for the last time on May 15, 2019, the ability vanished. I visited a friend in a different hospital the next week, walked through their ICU, and saw nothing. No numbers, no countdowns, nothing. It was as if the gift or curse was tied to that specific place, that specific time, that specific purpose. Whatever force had shown me death's schedule had apparently decided I had seen enough. I never returned to nursing. I now work in medical research, studying patterns in patient mortality, looking for signs others might miss. I still have my journal with those 47 documented cases, each one a reminder of those 3 months when I could see what no one should see. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else has experienced this, if there are others out there watching death's approach with terrible clarity. I've searched online forums, medical journals, paranormal investigations. I've found stories that come close, but nothing quite the same. The experience left me with more questions than answers. Why was I chosen? Why that specific ICU? Why those 3 months? Was it meant to teach me something about the inevitability of death? Was it a test of some kind? Or was it just a random glitch in reality that allowed me to perceive something normally hidden? I'll never know for certain. All I know is that for 92 days, I saw death's schedule, and it was always accurate. What haunts me most isn't the deaths I witnessed. It's the possibility that those numbers are still there, floating above patients' heads in ICUs around the world, visible to someone else now. Maybe another nurse is documenting cases, struggling with the burden of seeing what's coming. Maybe they're trying to prevent the inevitable, just like I did. Or maybe the numbers were only meant for me to see, a brief window into a reality we're not supposed to understand. I've thought about returning to Riverside Medical Center, just to check if I can still see them. But I'm terrified of what I might find. What if the ability returns? What if I see numbers above my own head? What if everyone has these countdowns, and I just couldn't see them outside the ICU? These questions keep me awake at night, wondering about the nature of fate, time, and death itself. The human mind isn't meant to know when death will arrive. We're supposed to live with uncertainty, to hope for tomorrow even when tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Sometimes I dream about those numbers. In my nightmares, everyone has them, counting down at different speeds. I see them above strangers on the street, above my family at dinner, above my own reflection in the mirror. I wake up gasping, fumbling for the light, relieved to see nothing but empty air above my partner's sleeping head. But the relief is always temporary, because I know those countdowns exist somewhere for someone, ticking away the seconds until the inevitable. People ask me why I left nursing. I tell them partial truths about burnout, about needing a change. But the real truth is that I saw too much. I saw death's precise schedule, and it broke something in me. Or maybe it fixed something, gave me a perspective on mortality that few people ever gain. Every day now feels like a gift because I know how precisely measured our time really is. I know that somewhere, invisible numbers are counting down for all of us. The 47 cases I documented remain unexplained. Medical science has no framework for what I experienced. The paranormal community offers theories but no proof. Religious leaders speak of divine revelation or demonic deception. But I don't think it was any of those things. I think I accidentally glimpsed a fundamental mechanism of reality, like seeing the code behind a computer program. Death isn't random. It's scheduled, precise, inevitable. We just aren't supposed to see the timeline. Even now, years later, when I visit hospitals, I find myself looking above patients' heads, checking for numbers that aren't there. It's become an involuntary reflex, like a soldier checking for threats long after the war has ended. Part of me misses the certainty those numbers provided, the ability to know exactly when someone's story would end. But mostly I'm grateful the ability is gone. Some knowledge is too heavy to carry. Some truths are better left hidden. My grandmother's words still echo in my mind. She said this gift came with purpose, even if that purpose wasn't clear. Maybe the purpose was simply to document it, to leave evidence that death follows a schedule we can't see. Maybe it was to teach me that knowing when death will arrive doesn't make it any less painful or any more preventable. Or maybe there was no purpose at all, just a random cosmic accident that allowed one ICU nurse to see behind reality's curtain for 3 terrible months. I've never spoken publicly about this experience until now, but I think it's time people knew. Not because I want attention or validation, but because somewhere out there, someone else might be seeing these numbers. They might be standing in a hospital room right now, watching a countdown above a loved one's head, feeling the crushing weight of knowledge they can't use. If you're reading this and you've seen them too, know that you're not alone. You're not crazy, and it's okay to walk away when it becomes too much. The truth is, we all have invisible numbers counting down above our heads. We just can't see them, and that's probably for the best. Life is meant to be lived in uncertainty, with hope for tomorrow and acceptance that tomorrow might not come. Those 3 months when I could see death's schedule taught me that knowing when the end will come doesn't change anything. It just makes the weight of living harder to bear. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder if those numbers are appearing somewhere. Is there another nurse in another ICU watching death approach with terrible precision? Are the numbers trying to show themselves to someone new? Or have they retreated back into whatever dimension they came from, hidden until the next person is chosen to witness death's perfect timekeeping? I'll never know, but I'll always remember those 47 countdowns, each one a life that ended exactly on schedule, each one a reminder that death keeps perfect time. Even now, as I share this story, I can't help but wonder, what if everyone watching this has numbers too? What if we all have countdowns we just can't see? What if someone out there can see yours right now, ticking away second by second? I know it's a terrifying thought, but maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to live like every moment matters, because for someone, somewhere, the numbers are getting close to zero. The question is, would you really want to know?